A lot of people in the comment section ask me how I make this base for my Red Corsairs. In today's tutorial I'm going to show how I go about designing the base, building it and painting it. So I hope you're going to enjoy this little tutorial. For this tutorial I'm going to use this Leviathan base, and when I was thinking how I want the base to look, I knew because of the size and the way the Leviathan is built, I wanted him to look like if, because of his mass, he just broke the floor or the ground on which he steps on. So for the texture I'm going to use just simple cork because it's the easiest material to break apart and cut into. As you can see here, I'm using a knife and my fingertips to break it apart and give it some shape. And also I'm going to keep all these small bits that come off for future projects, and as you're going to see later, for this project as well. But once you have your general shape done, bring back the model to see how it fits, and then going to just glue the cork down and going to build up the rough shape of the base. The idea with the small cork bits is to give it more of a rough shape, to make it more chaotic and natural looking. Also very important to keep the model for which you're building the base, to keep it near you, because you need always to check if it fits on the base or if you need more working on it. Then for the next step we're going to use these sea stones that I picked up from the beach. They're very perfect for any base building or terrain building, as they are very soft and they have this natural texture to them because of the sea salt. So we're going to first layer them on the base however you want them to look, but not gluing them at this point of the build, just visually laying them on the base and seeing do they fit or not. Be afraid to do a mistake in the building process and think on the fly. As you can see here, I made a mistake. The model didn't fit into the hole, so I decided to elevate the model a little bit higher with the cork again, and that's going to give me more space in between the legs and the base to fit the rocks, and with the rocks I'm going to create in the crater in which the Leviathan is stepping in. Once I'm happy with the positioning of the rocks, I'm going to glue them to the base using super glue, and I'm going to do the same thing as I did with the cork. I'm going to come back with the smaller pieces of rock and just layer them on top of the glued rocks and cork, adding more natural kind of environment feel and more texture to the base. As you can see, by keeping the model close to me at all time, I managed to create this kind of ruined ground with minimum gaps in between the stones and the legs of the Leviathan. As for the other side, because of the dynamic pose of the model, I'm going to build the base up towards the legs using cork to create this notion as if it lunges or steps forward. Once you place your model on top of the base, it shouldn't move, it shouldn't fall if you did everything correctly. And yeah, this is basically the first step, the build done, and this is how it looks like at this stage. So for the next step, once it's fully dried, which it should be because we use super glue, we're going to add the sandplaster. And sandplaster is basically a mix of sand, I'm using sea sand, and some PVA glue. Mix up them very well using either an old brush or a popsicle stick, adding more PVA glue if needed. The texture and basically the consistency should be like cream, not cream but rough cream, basically wet sand, let's put it that way. Once you achieve that, then you can start applying the mixture onto the base using the same brush or popsicle stick you used for mixing, but I prefer using a brush for bases. I'm using the mix the same way you would use plaster in terrain building. I'm pulling it into the crevices, hiding all the holes and all the cracks that I don't want to be visible. It's up to you how you want to go about on this stage. If you want some holes and you want some cracks, then you can leave them. I personally didn't. And don't be scared to use your finger to make the mix stick to the cork. this is how it looks after the first dry brush. We managed to cover almost the entire area, and now we're ready for the second dry brush. And for that we're going to mix some Dumble Brown with a little bit of Fire Dragon Bright. And for this step of the dry brushing, we're going to be as generous as with the first one. So this is what we have after the second dry brush. It's more orangey, but still the Dumble Brown is penetrating from underneath the orange. For the second dry brush, we're going to mix a little bit of downstone into the last mix and just heat up all the stones that we have on the base, so they have a different shade of orange. To pick out the stones even more, we're going to use pure downstone and just heat up all the raised areas of the stones. Out all the metal parts and the pillars, I'm going to use lead belcher for that, and instead of dry brushing it on, I'm going to stipple it on. After it's dried, I'm going to return with the Dumble Brown and orange mix and stipple just lightly it on the metal parts and on the stones, which will create this dust effect which usually pigments give you. going to return with the pure Fire Dragon Bright and very lightly dry brush all the raised areas of the base and slightly hit the metal parts and stones as well, but ever so slightly. After that I'm going to mix Fire Dragon Bright, Screaming Skull and some Flash Guts Yellow, and just slightly hit some raised areas of the base, but not overdoing it because we don't want to lose all that build-up shading that we did with the previous dry brushes. For the last dry brush I'm going to add a little bit more Screaming Skull to the mix and pick out all the edges of the stones before coming back with the Dumble Brown and Orange mix and stippling it a little bit more onto the rocks. And this is the finished result. I'm very happy with that. The only thing that's left to do is paint the rim of the base black, but you don't need me to explain to you how to do that. So yeah, very happy with the result. It's very marsh looking as I wanted. Different colors came from my Red Corsairs, but you were asking how I build the base, so I showed you how to build it here. And here's next to it the unpainted yet base of the Leviathan, for example, and you can do the same thing with infantry size bases. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Leave a like, leave a comment, and I catch you guys in the next one.